Governments globally are enacting strict measures to contain the coronavirus.
Contact tracing is one of the hottest keywords in South Korea at the moment.
Cell phones of quarantined citizens and virus carriers can be tracked by Israel's domestic intelligence.
So, will the coronavirus pandemic pave the way for a new normal in mass surveillance?
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. The COVID-19 pandemic is a news story like no other. And like journalists around the world, we are reporting on this from our homes. Our focus is on the media and information side of the coronavirus story. This week, we're examining the unprecedented rise in the surveillance and tracking of citizens and the long-term implications for society. We'll also look at the United States and its problem with disinformation, much of which comes from the very top, the White House and President Trump. In the worldwide battle against COVID-19, more and more governments are looking at our phones to track the infected and to prevent the virus from spreading. China, South Korea, Israel, Italy, and others are using phone location software along with CCTV video and credit card records, among other tools, to do that. Governments are understandably eager to use every weapon at their disposal in this fight. And phone tracking has already proven effective in some places, such as China. But these measures come with all kinds of questions on finding the right balance between the need for public safety and the individual's right to privacy. Another question worth asking: how long do the authorities intend to keep digging into our phones? Political leaders everywhere are likening the COVID-19 fight to a war. And it wouldn't be the first time that extraordinary security measures imposed during a time of war proved permanent and problematic. Our starting point this week is your mobile phone. Mobile phones have never been as vital as they are today in the midst of this pandemic. Billions of people are using their phones to find potentially life-saving information, to learn about the virus, how it infects, what the symptoms are, and how to get help. And depending on where you live, the authorities are using your phones too, as weapons in the fight against COVID-19. They're tapping into your data, finding out where you are, where you've been, telling you where not to go. The question is, what else are they using your data for? And how long do they intend to use it?
Because when we talk about mobile phone data, this is some of the most intrusive and detailed and highly sensitive data that you can have about individuals in terms of insights about who they are, where they are, their networks as well, and their behaviors. There needs to be more done in terms of transparency of what kind of data is going to be used for what purpose, who's going to have access to it.
Some of the most egregious surveillance abuses have come from China. We've seen highly invasive measures to monitor whether individuals should be allowed access to public transit, whether they should be allowed to go to work, whether they should be allowed to go to school. But they're also providing that data not just to public health authorities, but to law enforcement as well. And the same exact technology that's used to monitor the spread of COVID-19 infection can also be used to monitor political protests, religious movements, and any other form of constitutionally protected activity.
The use of phone data and the methodology vary from country to country. Jungwon Son is an academic based in London. He recently flew home to Seoul. Upon landing, the South Korean authorities compelled him to download a phone app that questions him daily on his health, on if he is showing any symptoms.
Every day, I am asked the questions about the symptoms, whether I have fever, I have trouble in breathing, etc. So then I report my symptoms to the health authority. And if they find something strange, they can immediately take action. And if I leave home without the permission, they can fine the $10,000 US. The government collects all the information about the infected and then put them on the map. And then central government publish it on their web. And so basically everybody has access to the movement of infected individuals.
Israel has issued emergency regulations. They recruit the General Security Service to collect technological data, which is presumably is location data, and transfer this data to the Ministry of Health. Privacy is at stake. Now, privacy, as we know, is a fundamental human right. In Israel, it enjoys a constitutional status, which is not absolute. Privacy can be compromised when there is some major public interest. The question is about proportionality. Are the measures undertaken now the best solution for the situation?
I'm even more concerned about the Taiwanese model, which involves the integration of a variety of government databases, including immigration information, location information, all into a coordinated tracking network. We must make sure that any information collected to fight COVID-19 is kept completely separate from information used by immigration authorities. If in any way this public health threat becomes conflated with immigration enforcement, it'll drive so many undocumented Americans into the shadows. And at a moment when we need every single person possible to get tested and get treated, that sort of measure could have really deadly consequences.
The list of countries using phone data to surveil grows longer by the day. In Italy, the authorities are tapping into it to determine if citizens are adhering to the lockdown rules. Singapore is posting information online on individual cases, detailed descriptions of those infected and who they have crossed paths with. And the Trump administration in Washington has consulted with big tech, companies like Facebook and Google, on how the phone location data that they hold can be added to the new surveillance mix. That has set off alarm bells in Congress and well beyond the U.S. on the implications for individual privacy.
Even in times of war, there are rules of engagement as defined, for example, through the Geneva Conventions. And similarly to this particular crisis, there are rules and obligations when it comes to the use of data and technology. And those still need to be enforced because even with the best intentions, some projects will have unforeseen or unintentional harms, particularly on those that are already marginalized.
The truth is, this is not a war. It is nothing like a war in legal terms and practical terms, and how it should bring us together as countries to fight this alongside each other. And I certainly think that some of the effort to transform COVID-19 into a security issue has distracted from the public health responses. We see an array of for-profit surveillance vendors that are trying to market their software, their hardware as the solution to this. So I do worry that, not only are government officials trying to reframe this issue as a security issue, but there's an entire industry that has a profit motive to have them do just that.
What is happening in people's mind is very similar to what would happen during the wartime. Government asks for sacrifices, and some people are willing to give it, and actually people are willing to force a few individuals to sacrifice as well. What we have to prepare is not just the emergency itself. We also have to prepare the situation when the emergency is over.
In some places, that day will never come. Emergency security measures are often imposed during a time of war. The coronavirus threat isn't a military one. It just sounds like one when political leaders talk about it.
I'm a wartime president. This is a war. This is a war, different kind of a war that we've ever had.
War analogies are getting a workout these days as politicians of different stripes try to rally public support.
We must act like any wartime government.
국가 전체가 감염병과의 전쟁에 돌입했습니다.
And when governments lay down new security measures, the kind that electorates would reject in normal, more peaceful times, history suggests that they will be reluctant to give up those new powers.
We've seen all too often that measures that are adopted for short emergencies are kept for years or for decades. Nearly 20 years after the attacks of 9/11 and the passage of the USA Patriot Act, we're still trying to repeal some of the more aggressive temporary measures that were passed as part of that legislation. Measures that were supposed to sunset or expire just a couple of years after. And so we cannot assume that any measure that we adopt to fight COVID-19 will die off with the death of this virus.
Maybe to give you a completely different example, just to help with the analogy, when the Olympic Games were being organized in Brazil, the Brazilian authorities deployed vast surveillance measures to ensure effective law enforcement. And unfortunately, a lot of these systems are still in place today because they become embedded within an ecosystem, be it the law enforcement one or the intelligence one or another. And once these systems are in place, it is really difficult to backtrack.
The coronavirus crisis is a civil crisis. It's not a terror. It's not a war. It's something else. Once this crisis will be over, we might find ourselves with no virus, that's good, but with no privacy either. And that will be a major loss for democratic countries and societies.
As the pandemic spreads, news consumers are searching far and wide for information they can rely on. But what if two of your primary sources of news, the government and the most watched television news channel, are setting aside medical science in favor of politically driven fiction? That's what Americans have been dealing with. The stream of disinformation flowing from the White House has misled the public on the severity of the threat and has put lives at risk. That is why one U.S. radio network has decided it will no longer broadcast President Trump's daily news briefings live. Television news networks are debating internally whether they should do the same. That's not even a question, though, at Fox News, the channel that's ideologically aligned with the president. While it has gradually changed its tone on the coronavirus story, no longer describing it as some politically driven hoax, Fox still largely toes the line set by the White House. The stakes are high, and it's clear that President Trump and Fox News are in this together, come what may. Our starting point for this story is Washington, D.C.
Here to discuss it is Fox News medical contributor Dr. Nicole Sapphire.
A prediction about the coverage of the coronavirus and misinformation made about 3 weeks ago on America's most watched news channel.
The economic and emotional toll by misinformation is going to hit us much harder than this virus is in itself.
Of all the networks to sound the alarm about COVID-19 and misinformation, that soundbite was on Fox News.
It definitely is quite ironic. Fox News has been a steady source of misinformation about the coronavirus, peddling the idea that it's no big deal.
I feel like the more I learn about this, the less there is to worry about. I was about to say the same thing.
So the irony is not lost that Fox is calling against misinformation while spreading it.
It would be difficult to understate the Fox News factor in America's misinformation problem. Fox has taken a similar approach to the way it covered other White House scandals, like Russiagate and the subsequent impeachment hearings, downplaying the seriousness.
The whole Ukraine impeachment saga is boring, hard to understand, and apparently goes on for eternity.
Attacking Trump's critics as politically driven.
Over this sham show.
And applied it to a public health emergency.
Having so many people listen to one massive news source for information, it's going to have an effect that sort of ripples through people that aren't connected to Fox News because they're in proximity to the people who are still going about their daily lives, as if this is not happening, because they've been told by a number of hosts on Fox News that it's for weeks that it's not as serious as it actually is.
The Fox effect can be measured. A poll conducted by the Pew Research Center found that Fox News viewers are almost 5 times as likely as MSNBC viewers to believe that the media have greatly exaggerated the threat of the coronavirus. Given that Fox's audience is the oldest of the major networks and therefore the most vulnerable, the channel's coverage is truly dangerous. Fox has moved on from initially playing the story down, succumbing, as the president has, to reality.
The coronavirus, every virus, as we have been telling you, you must take it seriously.
But it took far too long. The network hitched its wagon to Donald Trump long ago, and its coverage has mirrored the president's shifting position on the coronavirus story. Mediaite.com monitors broadcast news coverage in the U.S. It bolted together a chronology of Donald Trump's sound bites on COVID-19 over a 6-week period. As the number of cases in the U.S. climbed alarmingly, Trump's message changed drastically.
How concerned are you?
Well, we pretty much shut it down. You know, a lot of people think that goes away in April. Within a couple of days, it's going to be down to close to zero. There's a chance that it won't spread. It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle.
Almost everybody that we see is getting better. And it could be everybody, too.
They're going to have vaccines, I think, relatively soon.
What do you say to Americans who are concerned that you're not taking this seriously enough and that some of your statements don't match what your health experts are saying?
That's CNN, fake news. It's really working out, and a lot of good things are going to happen. No, I don't take responsibility at all, but it's something that we have tremendous control of.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your response to this crisis?
I'd rate it a 10.
Just a few days ago, he really started using words like pandemic. He said it's really bad. He acknowledged it's out of control. But something or someone began making him speak about it differently. There have been reports that one of the Fox personalities, Tucker Carlson, who he's close to, did start taking it seriously.
We haven't faced a medical crisis like this in living memory.
And was talking to the president about how he needed to change his demeanor on it, his message on it.
Trump and his allies try and manipulate the rhetoric and shift blame, but they cannot manipulate the virus with the misinformation. And we do have a free press here in the United States that will continue to report out statistics of confirmed cases and death rates. And even though we'll be getting that information, Trump and right-wing media will definitely continue to shift the blame.
It's particularly dangerous to lie in a crisis like this, to get a people to do what they don't want to do, to get collective action out of a group of people that have different ideas of what should happen. You need a strong central authority whom people trust that has their best interest in mind. By lying, you of course remove that element of trust.
The Trump administration had a trust issue with the government's own scientists, although that too is changing. In the early stages, the White House was doing most of the briefings and dispatched its economic officials to calm the markets. But the actual medical experts at the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, were initially sidelined. Anthony Fauci, who heads the National Institute of Infectious Disease, is doing more public speaking now. But as recently as March 1st, when he had 5 different interviews set for the Sunday morning talk shows, the White House told him to stand down in favor of officials like Vice President Mike Pence.
I'm very confident we're ready.
The administration has been silencing scientific voices since the very start of its administration, particularly in regards to climate change and environmental protections. They've been dismantling these scientific agencies. Particularly in this case, Trump had dismantled the office that would have been working on pandemic response.
To be fair, the CDC and a number of other executive branch agencies have a fairly long history of increasingly being reluctant to discuss things with the public or the press directly. This was true during the Obama administration as well. Journalists could no longer speak to officials from the CDC. Of course, in the Trump administration, this has gotten exponentially worse, but it would be unfair to say that this was a Trump innovation.
We've seen sort of a whole litany of myths and just lies really from the administration that go into the face of science. And when it comes to climate change, of course, that's a huge issue. That's sort of a long-term, bigger picture thing. But right now, the administration's anti-science talking points on COVID-19, we're going to be feeling that immediately because people are going to get sick if they are listening to the administration.
In being elected to office and managing to stay there, Donald Trump has proven that facts don't matter the way they used to, that lies just don't stick to presidents the way they once did. But the coronavirus story is different. It's about medical science first, politics second. The facts are right there in the numbers, the body counts, and they are incontestable. Could it be that Donald Trump's fake news narrative has finally been exposed, met its match, in something he has never had much time for? Science.
Every one of these doctors said, how do you know so much about this? Maybe I have a natural ability. Maybe I should have done that instead of running for president.
Well, it would be nice to think that it's met its match once external reality hits it. However, I'm much more skeptical. The broader breakdown is that people are accepting that criticism, even good faith criticism, is a sign of enmity. That you cannot take criticism without assuming that the critic is your opponent politically. So in an ideal situation, yes, one would say that, look, this is reality, we have to reject the lies. But it is not a preordained outcome that, in fact, the lies may defeat the truth, even when the truth is obvious.
This is a virus. It's not a political movement, and it doesn't have an ideology, and it doesn't care about your ideology. It just has a way of attacking our bodies. So lack of clarity, the attempts to not really grapple with the threat that the whole world is facing cost us time, and maybe it cost lives.